Romans 5, verses 3 through 5. Not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit, who has been given to us. Martin Luther King said, faith is taking the first step even when you don't see the whole staircase. You know, I keep on seeing these advertisements for these really kind of funky throw rugs and stuff that looks like a great big pit, and people put them outside their stinking bathroom. You do that to me and I'm going to have a heart attack. But I notice a lot of times they'll even open the door after they put it down, they know it's there, and they stop and they reach down and touch it. It's like, come on. That's just plain craziness. But hey, I saw that they threw one down and some dogs came up, and it was a big Rottweiler, a little Chihuahua, and a cat. And the Rottweiler looked at it and stopped and looked, and then picked up the Chihuahua and threw it in the middle of the rug. And when it didn't fall, it's safe to walk. So it's like, yep, that's my kind of dog there. The Lord had spoken to Gideon each step of the way, and Gideon's faith had grown. The angel of the Lord had called him, and he listened. The command was to destroy the Baal altar. He doubted. He was afraid, but he acted, and he obeyed, and he destroyed that altar. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he blew the trumpet to gather the army of Israel. And when it arrived, the Lord sifted that army of 32,000 down to 300. Why? Well, so Israel couldn't take the credit for the victory that was coming. Gideon's faith had increased dramatically. From the pit where he was sifting that wheat, each step of the way the Lord gave him a greater challenge. And Gideon's initial reaction was doubt and fear. But his final action was faith in the Lord. Gideon's faith in the Lord had won out over fear. Had Gideon been faced with the next decision right away when he was sifting that wheat, I really think that Gideon probably would not have been walking with the Lord. Because he knew himself. But the Lord knew better. But the Lord was growing him to become that mighty person that the angel of the Lord said he was. The Lord grows our faith in the same way today. Again, Gideon was faced with decisions and indecision, but the Lord had commanded him to attack a force of 135,000 with only 300 men. The victory over the Midianites was assured, and the Lord had given them into his hand. We're going to step into a thing that is be silent and listen. Just be silent and listen. Judges 7:9. The same night the Lord said to him, arise, go down against the camp, for I have given it into your hand. American director and screenwriter George Seaton, best known for his movie The Miracle on 34th Street, that original version, said, faith is believing in things when common sense tells you not to. Here, Gideon, I want you to get up and go down to the camp. Go down there. I'm giving it into your hands. Well, you've already taken me down to 300 guys. Now you're saying, I got to go down to the camp? Lord, what are you smoking? I need some of that in order to do what you're asking me to do. So what does God tell him? Judges 7:10 through 12. But if you are afraid to go down to the camp with Purah, your servant, and you shall hear what they say, and afterward your hand shall be strengthened to go down against the camp. Then he went down with Purah and his servant to the outposts of the armed men who were in the camp. And the Midianites and the Amalekites and all the people of the east, they lay among the valley like a locust in abundance. And their camels were without number, as the sand that is on the seashore in abundance. Okay, God, now you're telling me something else. Take my guy with me. All right. We'll go down, we'll go down, but I'm not sure if my guy is going to be, he's probably just as willing as I am. And thinking the same thing, but what if we are caught? Gideon was faced with a task that was beyond reason and beyond his capabilities, and that of the 300 men. The Lord knew he would be afraid and filled with doubt. Who wouldn't? I would be. I'm not sure I would have gone down. But the Lord gave him a way to be encouraged. If you are afraid to attack, get your servant, go down to the camp, and listen to what they're saying. Afterward, you will be encouraged to attack that camp. So he and his servant went down to the outposts of the camp, and it tells us that those Midianites and Amalekites and all the people of the east, they were down there in that valley. And they were so numerous that their camels, you couldn't even count them. They were just like the sand on the shore. Psalm 73:26, my flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. Yep, Gideon was afraid. He had doubt about the outcome of the battle. The Lord had said that they were given into your hand. I'm giving them into your hand, but Gideon doubted the given. He doubted the given. The valley below did not look good for his 300 Israelites, and the enemies gathered together were as thick as locusts. That's bad. That's real bad. Now, no wonder Gideon doubted and was afraid. The Lord gave Gideon the opportunity to strengthen his faith. He and Purah went to sneak into the camp and listen to what the Midianites were saying about the approaching battle, and all he had to do was just go. Does the Lord give us opportunities to strengthen our faith when the enemies are all around? Yeah, he does. He has given us other believers to encourage us each time that we gather together. He gives us his word. He gives us Bible studies. He gives us his great promises of a victory from the old. Their problem is some are not willing to gather regularly. Some people just don't want to get together. And it's no wonder why many believers live a defeated lifestyle. Judges 7:13 and 14. When Gideon came, behold, a man was telling a dream to his comrade. And he said, behold, I dreamed a dream. And behold, a cake of barley bread tumbled into the camp of Midian and came to the tent and struck it so that it fell and turned it upside down, so that the tent lay flat. And his comrade answered, there is no other than the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, the man of Israel. God has given into his hand Midian and all the camp. Gideon arrived just at that most opportune time, and he heard the man telling his friend his dream. A dreamer was telling what he had seen in his sleep, a loaf of barley bread and a tent. The bread came down and crashed into the tent in the middle of the camp. And the two symbols in the dream, the bread and the tent, are significant in understanding the interpretation of the dream. The barley bread was the bread of slaves. It's the bread of slaves. And it was cheap and made from ingredients that in the end could barely be eaten by men. It's disgusting. It was vile. The bread or cake symbolized the nation of Israel who had become slaves to the Midianites. The tent in the middle of the camp represented the Midianites and their leaders. They would be struck down by the loaf of bread as it came tumbling down the mountainside. Now, where was Gideon? Not just in the camp right now, because that's where he is, but where is his men camped? On the hill, above them. The friend knew what the dream and its symbols meant, the destruction of the Midianites by the sword of Gideon. And the Midianites were more afraid of Gideon than he was of them. And I don't think that the Lord just gave these two this little bitty dream. I think that God was giving everybody in the camp this dream, or dreams similar to it. What is really interesting is they knew who Gideon was. They knew him by name. Have they ever met him? Probably not. Doesn't this whole thing sound kind of familiar? The dread that these men and everybody had of Gideon, doesn't it sound familiar? Well, it should, because this is not the first time that God's done this. Joshua 2, verses 8 and 9 and 11. Before the men lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said to them, I know that the Lord has given you the land, and that all the fear of you has fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land melt away before you. And as soon as we heard it, our hearts melted. And there was no spirit left in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, He is God in the heaven above and on the earth beneath. Presbyterian pastor Dr. Frederick W. Kropp said, there is much in the world to make us afraid. But did you know that there is much more in our faith to make us unafraid? So there he was, down in the camp, and he got confirmation of what God was telling him. And it strengthens the heart. Judges 7:15, as soon as Gideon heard the telling of the dream and its interpretation, he worshiped. And he returned to the camp of Israel and said, arise, for the Lord has given the host of the Midian into your hand. Now, I want to know what it was how he worshipped. This was exciting news. Was he just sitting there hunkered with Purah and on their way back? I'm going, yeah, the Lord gives. Oh. Was he super excited that way? Because I know when he got to the camp, he was excited, he was pumped up, and he was ready to wage war. He had been strengthened just as the Lord had said. His response to the dream and its interpretation, it was worship. Gideon praised God because his word was true, and the victory would be Israel's. And he went back to the camp excited at what the Lord had revealed to him. I'd be excited too. He was now confident of the outcome of the battle, and he acted as his renewed and strengthened faith. He was ready to go. He commanded the 300 and told them the battle is theirs to win, and it was time to make preparation for that battle. Psalm 118, verses 6 and 7. The Lord is on my side. I will not fear. What can man do to me? The Lord is on my side as my helper. I shall look in triumph on those who hate me. I love that movie, Braveheart. I love it with a passion. And on the big screen, it's got to be on the big screen. It's not the same on TV. And the Battle of Stirling Bridge, you remember that one? That was fought on September 11th, 1297. And it was that pivotal conflict in the First War of the Scottish Independence. And it's that one where William Wallace and Andrew Murray led Scottish forces to a significant victory against the English. In the movie, if you remember right, this is where him and his band of men came riding down the camp, or the battle lines, and they had the blue stuff on their face. And he's galloping along, and people are like, there's too many, and they start to run away, and he goes, and the Lord's, wait, don't flee, let us have a chance to negotiate. And there he is. He comes up, and he's riding back and forth, and he's talking to these guys. And he's like telling them, yes, it is true. Run, and you will live. Fight, and you might die. But are you willing to fight and die as free men? Just for the chance to feel freedom. Now, this is how I imagine Gideon come back to the camp. That kind of an excitement and that encouragement would have inspired those men. Guys, God has given it to us. This is what happened. Let's go. And the men, I'm sure that they got a little excited themselves. But they still don't know what's going on. They're willing to go. But he hasn't told them God's game plan yet. Judges 7, 16 through 18. And he divided the men into 300 300 men into 3 companies, and put trumpets in the hand of all of them, and empty jars with torches inside the jars. And he said to them, look at me, and do likewise. When I come to the outskirts of the camp, do as I do. When I blow the trumpet, I and all who are with me, then blow the trumpets also on every side of all the camp, and shout, for the Lord and for Gideon. Well, this is typical. Preparation for battle begins with organize your army. The 300, they're divided into 3 companies, each one of the 100 men. And he says, now let's go around the sides of the camp. A 3-pronged attack. It's going to be better than one straightforward, especially if it was a surprise attack. Every army, before it goes into battle, they do what? They get their requisition forms, they go to the quartermaster, and they say, hey, we need this and this and this, we need our rifles, we need ammunition, we need some hand grenades, we need all this other fun stuff to be able to go into battle. We need radios, we need food. But notice Gideon's items. Notice what's it said. He gives his men trumpets, empty jars, and torches. Now wait just a minute. Where's their swords? Where's their knives? Where's their pitchforks? Where's anything that you could fight with? Certainly they couldn't be expected to carry out an attack with only these few items. None of them, except for perhaps maybe the torch, could be used in a fight. The Lord was going to demonstrate his awesome power with these faithful 300. We do not read of anyone questioning or complaining. Not a one. Unusual. We do see men with great faith in their leader, and they see their leader's great faith in the Lord. The plan laid out for the battle was relatively simple. Follow my lead and do everything that I do. Just do it. The other command was to shout for the Lord and for Gideon. That little translation in Hebrew is sword for the Lord and Gideon. They were to make sure the Midianites knew who it was that had those lit torches and blowing on them trumpets. They needed to know who it was that was smashing, they probably didn't know it was smashing of pots, but they needed to know who that noise was coming from. It's the same battle plan that the Lord gives us today. Follow me. Follow me. Be obedient. Do what I tell you to do. I'm giving you the game plan. We trust in his word. Follow him only. Act in faith. Give witness to Christ. And we will have the victory in life. Well, the men go down. And they do the little surrounding of the stuff. And because they were obedient, what was the end result? Judges 7, 19 through 22. So Gideon and the 300 men who were with him came to the outskirts of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch, when they had just set the watch. And they blew the trumpets and smashed the jars that were in their hands. Then the 300 companies blew the trumpets and broke the jars. They held in their hands the torches, and their right hands the trumpets to blow. And they cried out, a sword for the Lord and for Gideon. And every man stood in his place around the camp. And all the army ran. They cried out and fled. And when they blew the 300 trumpets, the Lord set every man's sword against his comrade and against all the army. And the army fled as far as Beth Shittah toward Zerah, and as far as the border of Abel Meholah of Tabbath. God did this one too, later on, if you remember right, when they had the siege that took place outside of the city. Gideon and his men went down to the camp somewhere around midnight, the middle of the watch. They approached with their torches covered by the jars, and they could see where they were going. Why? Because the torches were in the jar and the light shining down, so they could see where they're walking, but no one else can see it because the light's in the jar. It's directed down. When they got in a position around the camp, they blew the trumpets. And I can imagine that every Midian awoke from sleep scared to death because of the noise that was so loud and so very close, and it's just not in front of them. Sort of like when you're blowing the shofar and you hear it echoing off of the mountain, across the highway. You hear it echoing off the buildings. You hear it echoing off of those hills over there. Oh my gosh! They next broke the jars, which made a tremendous noise. And I could imagine that the enemy thought there were thousands and thousands of men there that were descending on their camp. And the torches were also uncovered, showing how close they were. They shouted at the top of their voices, "For the Lord and for Gideon." The Midianite camp awoke in a fright. They thought they were in the midst of a defeat by Gideon, and they ran in every direction. They were crying. They grabbed their swords and they started slashing anything that was close to them. And all they did, they just continued to blow their trumpets, and they didn't move. They just stood there. They held their positions. They stood firm in the midst of the great battle. The enemy were all around them with no offensive weapons. And the Lord gives us that same word today. 1 Corinthians 16, 13 and 14. Be watchful. Stand firm in the faith. Act like men. Be strong. Let all that you do be done in love. When the 300 trumpets sounded, the Lord caused the men throughout the camp to turn on each other with their swords. The army fled to Beth Shittah toward Zerah, and as far as the border of Abel Meholah near Tabbath. The battle was truly won by the Lord, and it was a miracle. Gideon and his men stood firm, held their position, and the Lord caused the enemy to turn on their own selves with their swords. 300 men of the Lord were victorious over that enemy that vastly outnumbered them without raising a weapon. The Lord had promised Gideon victory, and Gideon walked by faith and went to battle. The Lord gave Gideon the victory, and there would be no doubt in anyone's mind. Can you imagine when they get back to seeing everybody in their own cities? Yeah, man, you wouldn't believe this stuff. It was so cool. We didn't raise a weapon. Then how did you beat them? We blew a trumpet and we shined torches. That's all we had to do. We didn't go into battle. We stood there. The Lord fought for us. There's no doubt in their mind. They know that the Lord had given them the victory just as He promised. A.W. Tozer said, the Bible recognizes no faith that does not lead to obedience, nor does it recognize any obedience that does not spring up from faith. The two are opposite sides of the same coin. Judges 7:23. And the men of Israel were called out from Naphtali and from Asher and from all of Manasseh, and they pursued after Midian. Gideon had wisely sent word to the surrounding areas. He told them to seize the Midianites as they ran. His fellow countrymen were called out and pursued the fleeing enemy. Those men were sent home. They would still get a piece of the action. They would still get part of the booty that was collected. Judges 7:24a. Gideon sent messengers throughout all the hill country to Ephraim, saying, come down against the Midianites and capture the waters against them, as far as Beth Barah and also the Jordan. He had also told Ephraim to come down to the Jordan to cut off the Midianites to escape to the other side. And guess what? They captured their two great princes, their two leaders, Oreb and Zeb. The location of their capture and beheading is really interesting. Oreb by the rock and Zeb next to the winepress. Gosh, isn't these the things that Gideon was around when the Lord called him? He was hiding in a winepress, thrashing wheat. The threat of Midian was gone for the moment, and Gideon carried out the mission that the Lord set before him. The Israelite nation could again worship the Lord in freedom and safety. They were again the great nation God had intended them to be. So now, how does that all apply to today? Gideon had finally fulfilled the name given to him by the angel of the Lord. He was a mighty warrior. He led an army of 300 to defeat the 135,000. It was truly a miraculous feat of faith. And how did Gideon become this man? The Lord grew his faith a little bit at a time. He didn't just throw him in the lion's den all at once. He built it up a little at a time. God gave him small steps of faith that eventually led to a giant step of faith in the Lord God. And the Lord grows our faith in the same way, one small step at a time. We will one day be a mighty warrior. Will we? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not. But you will become the person that the Lord wants you to be. Also, Gideon was filled with doubt and fear at every step of the way. Remember, doubt is needed for faith to exist. And faith is trusting in things unseen. Is fear okay? Yeah. Both fear and doubt are a part of stepping out into the unknown, but faith can overcome those doubts and are part of taking the step of faith that the Lord has commanded. Gideon heard the word of the Lord and followed. The formula leading to a strong, dynamic life, changing faith, is the same. Hear God's word and heed God's word. We read or hear and obey. That's how we will become what the Lord desires us to be. 2 Chronicles 20:20b. Believe in the Lord your God, and you will be established. Believe his prophets, and you will succeed. As we go out this week, listen. Just listen. And if you're not hearing him, ask him, Lord, let me hear you. What is it that you want from me? I know you have a purpose for my life. Can you tell me what it is? And start building me up step by step to accomplish that purpose. Let's go to prayer.